The glass counter trembled under his fist. "You're worthless." The customer's voice cut through the quiet boutique like a whip. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples as spit flew from his mouth. "Absolutely worthless. Do you even know who I am? I could buy this entire pathetic store with my pocket change, and you're nothing but a waste of space in a cheap uniform." The woman behind the counter didn't flinch. Her name tag read Vera. She stood perfectly still, dark eyes steady, hands folded calmly on the glass surface between them. Her expression was blank, practiced, like she'd worn this mask 1,000 times before. "I apologize, sir," she said quietly. "But as I explained, we cannot process a return without a receipt. Store policy." He slammed his hand down again. The sound echoed through the luxury boutique on Fifth Avenue. Other customers turned to stare. A security guard shifted nervously by the entrance but didn't approach. Not yet. "Policy?" the man laughed, harsh and ugly. "I don't care about your policy, you stupid girl. Get your manager. Now. Or better yet, get on your knees and beg me not to ruin your pathetic little life." Something flickered in Vera's eyes, just for a second, like lightning behind storm clouds. Then it was gone. "I'll call my manager," she said softly. What this furious customer didn't know, what nobody in that gleaming Manhattan boutique knew, was that the woman he was screaming at owned half the city. That the delicate hands folded so calmly on the counter had signed execution orders with the same pen she used for employee schedules. That beneath her modest cardigan and simple skirt was a network of scars, each one a story of survival in a world that chewed up the weak and spat out the rest. Her real name wasn't Vera. It was Sienna Kovač, and she was the widow queen of the Kovač syndicate. If you're already hooked, drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how global this story reaches. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This story doesn't begin with revelation. It begins 3 years earlier, with fire and blood and a choice that changed everything. The penthouse was burning. Sienna ran through smoke so thick it clawed at her lungs. Her evening gown, midnight blue, worth more than most people's cars, was torn and stained with ash. Behind her, gunfire cracked through the night. Her husband's men were dying. The ambush had come from inside. Someone had betrayed them. Someone always did. "Milosh," she screamed his name, stumbling through the wreckage of what had been their bedroom. Glass crunched under her heels. The heat was unbearable. "Milosh, where are you?" She found him in his office. He was slumped over his desk, blood pooling beneath him. 3 bullet wounds, center mass, professional work. "Sienna," his voice was wet, bubbling. He reached for her with shaking fingers. "Run." She dropped to her knees beside him. 23 years old and suddenly drowning in a reality she'd been sheltered from. She'd known what her husband was, what his family did, but knowing and seeing were different things. "I'm not leaving you." Her hands pressed against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Useless. She knew it was useless. "Listen to me." He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. His gray eyes were already fatting. They think you're weak. Let them." "What are you?" "Disappear," he gasped. "Become no one, learn everything, then come back." His grip tightened. Promise me you'll survive this." "I promise." "And Sienna," blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "When you come back, burn them all." He died with those words on his lips. The fire department found the penthouse empty except for bodies. No survivors. No Sienna Kovač. The newspapers reported that the young widow had perished in the flames. The Kovač syndicate fractured. Wars erupted over territory. The old guard assumed power, men who'd served her husband's father, men who'd always resented Milosh for marrying an outsider with no connections and no strength. They never looked for a ghost. 3 years, that's how long she'd been invisible. Sienna worked retail at various high-end stores across Manhattan. She lived in a tiny studio apartment in Queens under a false name. She took the subway, bought groceries at corner stores, learned to be ordinary. But ordinary was a disguise, not a transformation. At night in that cramped studio, she studied. Financial records her husband had hidden, names, bank accounts. shell corporations, the labyrinth of connections that held the Kovač empire together, and the weak points where it could all come crashing down. She learned who had betrayed them, who had ordered her husband killed, who now sat in the seat of power that should have been hers by right of succession and blood. His name was Victor Dalka, her husband's former second-in-command, the man who'd stood at their wedding and smiled while plotting murder. She also trained, a private gym in the Bronx where nobody asked questions, self-defense, weapons, strategy. She learned from men who'd retired from the life, men who didn't know who she really was. They saw a woman who'd survived something terrible and wanted to make sure it never happened again. They had no idea they were sharpening a blade that would soon cut through the heart of New York's underworld. But for now she was Vera, the quiet store clerk, the woman people yelled at and dismissed and forgot the moment they walked away. Which was exactly how she wanted it. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Sienna arrived at the boutique at 9, smiled at her coworker Michelle, straightened displays, helped customers find the right sizes, rang up purchases. Normal, boring, safe. Then he walked in. Tall, dark suit that cost more than her monthly rent, sharp jawline and sharper eyes that scanned the store with the precision of a man who missed nothing. He moved like a predator, all controlled grace and coiled power. Sienna's pulse quickened. She knew him, not personally, but she knew what he was. You didn't survive in her world without recognizing danger when it walked through the door wearing Tom Ford. He browsed for exactly 7 minutes, touched nothing, looked at everything. When he approached the counter, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I need a gift," he said. His voice was smoke and velvet. "For someone important." "Of course." She kept her tone professional, bland. "What's the occasion?" "An apology." "I see. Do you know their style preferences?" Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe. Surprise me. It was a test. She could feel it. Sienna moved through the store with practiced ease, selecting items that spoke of quality without ostentation. A silk scarf in deep emerald, understated but luxurious. When she brought it back, he studied both the scarf and her with equal attention. "Interesting choice," he murmured. "It's versatile," she replied calmly. "Elegant without being presumptuous. If you don't know someone well, it's better to suggest than to declare." Wise words. He pulled out a black credit card. "From someone who works retail." Her smile didn't waver. "We're all full of surprises, aren't we?" He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "Yes, I'm beginning to think we are." He left without another word, but Sienna's hands shook as she processed the return transaction for the next customer, because she'd recognized that credit card, the name embossed in silver letters. Dante Volkov. He was the phantom of the Eastern Territories, a power player who'd risen from nowhere over the past 3 years, absorbing smaller operations, forming alliances that shouldn't be possible. Nobody knew where he'd come from, nobody knew who backed him, but everyone knew his reputation. Ruthless, calculating, untouchable. And he just looked at her like he could see straight through her disguise. That's when the angry customer arrived. His name, she'd learn later, was Gerald Hendricks. Hedge fund manager, mediocre money, inflated ego. He'd bought a tie for his mistress, apparently, and she'd hated it. Now he wanted to return it without a receipt, which wasn't going to happen. Hence the screaming. "You're worthless, absolutely worthless." Sienna stood there and took it. Let him rage. Let him humiliate her in front of the entire store. Let every customer and employee see her as weak, as nothing, as a target for any bully with enough money to think himself a king. Let them all see what they expected to see. "Get your manager, now." She turned toward the back office. That's when she saw him again. Dante Volkov stood near the entrance. He'd come back, and he was watching the entire scene with those predator eyes, expression unreadable. Their gazes met for exactly 3 seconds. Then she walked away to get her manager. But she felt his stare like a brand on her back. The manager handled Gerald. Eventually. It took 20 minutes of groveling and a 30% discount on a new tie to make him leave. By then, the store was buzzing with gossip about the crazy customer and poor Vera who'd stood there and taken the abuse so professionally. Sienna went back to work. Dante Volkov was gone. She told herself it didn't matter, that it was coincidence, that she was being paranoid. But that night, when she left the store and walked toward the subway, she felt it again. That prickling awareness that meant someone was watching. She took a deliberately roundabout route home, stopped at a bodega for milk she didn't need, checked reflections in windows. Nothing, no one. Still, the feeling persisted. When she finally reached her studio apartment, she found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single card, heavy stock, expensive, just 3 words in elegant script. "You're being watched." No signature, no return address. Sienna stood in her dark apartment, holding that card, and smiled for the first time in 3 years without it being part of her disguise. Finally, something was happening. She found him the next night at an underground poker game in Tribeca. Getting in required calling and favors she'd been saving, using connections she'd built quietly over 3 years. But Sienna was done being patient, done being invisible. If Dante Volkov was watching her, she needed to know why. The game was held in the basement of an Italian restaurant. Heavy smoke, heavier tension. Men in expensive suits gambling with money that would ruin lives. This was where deals were really made, where territory changed hands on the turn of a card. Dante sat at the main table. He didn't look up when she entered, but she saw his shoulders tense. Recognition. She approached slowly. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. "I'm looking for a game," she said calmly. The dealer, a scarred man with dead eyes, laughed. "This isn't that kind of place, sweetheart. Go home." "I have money." She pulled out a thick envelope, 10,000 in cash, rent money for a year, savings she'd been hoarding. "And I have an invitation." That was a lie, but she said it with such confidence that doubt flickered across the dealer's face. "From who?" "From me." Dante's voice cut through the smoke. He still hadn't looked at her directly. "She can play, deal her in." Just like that, she was sitting across from him, cards in her hand, chips stacked in front of her, close enough to see the silver flecks in his dark eyes when he finally raised his gaze to meet hers. "You followed me," she said quietly enough that only he could hear over the ambient noise. "You let me," he studied his cards. "Question is, why?" "Maybe I was curious." "Curious about what?" Who leaves cryptic notes under doors, what he wants, why he's watching a nobody who works retail. Dante's lips curved. "Is that what you are, a nobody?" "Isn't that what you see?" He discarded a card, drew a new one. "I see a woman who chose the perfect gift for an apology she knows nothing about, who stood there while a pathetic little man tried to break her and didn't even blink, who tracked me to an illegal poker game 48 hours later." He finally looked at her again. "So no, I don't see a nobody." Sienna's heart hammered. "Then what do you see?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." They played 5 hands. She won 3, lost the other 2 deliberately. Read him the way she'd learned to read men who held power, the tells in how they held their cards, bet their chips, controlled their breathing. Dante Volkov was good, very good, but she'd been trained by the best, and grief was a hell of a teacher. When the game ended, he stood. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They walked through Tribeca in silence, past luxury apartments and boutique hotels. The night was cold, October wind cutting through her thin jacket. Dante walked with his hands in his pockets, relaxed but alert. Bodyguards followed at a discreet distance. "Why retail?" he finally asked. "It pays the bills." "Does it?" He glanced at her. "You dropped 10,000 tonight like it was pocket change. That's not retail money." "Maybe I save well." "Or maybe you're lying." There was no accusation in his tone, just observation. "Why did you really track me down tonight, Vera?" The way he said her name, the fake name, made it clear he knew it was false. Sienna stopped walking. They were on a bridge overlooking the Hudson. The water below was black, reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. "Who are you?" she asked. "You know who I am. I know your name, I know your reputation, but I don't know why you're watching me." Dante turned to face her fully. Up close, she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the way his eyes held shadows that matched her own. "Because," he said slowly, "3 days ago, Victor Dalka asked me to find someone, a ghost, a woman who died 3 years ago but whose body was never recovered, someone who might be alive and planning something very stupid." Ice flooded Sienna's veins. "And I was looking through financial records for anomalies, patterns, when I found a bank account that receives regular deposits from a trust connected to the Kovač estate, small amounts, barely noticeable, but consistent." He stepped closer. "The deposits go to an apartment in Queens, under the name Vera Morrison." She didn't move, didn't breathe. "So I went looking for Vera Morrison," Dante continued, "and I found a woman working retail, invisible, ordinary, except she's not, because I saw her face and I know exactly who she is." He paused. "Hello, Sienna." The world tilted. Then Sienna did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She let the mask drop, let him see the real woman beneath the disguise. The widow, the queen, the ghost come back to claim her throne. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked quietly. "That depends." "On what?" Dante smiled. "On whether you're planning to do this alone, or if you're smart enough to accept help." "Why would you help me?" "Because Victor Dalka killed your husband to seize power, and 3 months ago he killed my brother for refusing to merge territories." His voice went cold. "I've been planning my revenge carefully, methodically, gathering allies, resources, information, but you..." He looked at her with something like admiration. "You've been invisible for 3 years. That takes patience, discipline, rage that burns slow and steady." "So what?" Sienna's hands clenched. "You want an ally." "I want a partner." "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't." He pulled something from his pocket, a flash drive. "But this contains everything I've gathered on Dalka, his operations, his weaknesses, his secrets. Take it, use it. If you still don't trust me after you see what I've found, walk away. I won't stop you." She took the flash drive. Their fingers brushed. Electricity sparked. "And if I do trust you?" she asked. "Then we burn him together." Dante's smile was sharp. "The way he deserves." The drive contained everything. Sienna spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing the files. Bank records showing how Dalka had embezzled from the Kovač operations. Communications proving he'd ordered the hit on her husband. Photographs of his current organization, men she'd known, men who'd eaten at her table and sworn loyalty, now serving her husband's killer. But there was more. Dante had found Dalka's secrets, the things he'd done that even the Kovač old guard didn't know, the innocent people he'd killed to cover his tracks, the families destroyed for his ambition, the children caught in crossfire. By the 3rd night, Sienna's hands shook with rage. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, just an address and a time. She went. The address was a penthouse in Midtown, luxury building. Doorman who waved her through like she was expected. When she stepped off the elevator, Dante was waiting. "You came," he said. "Did you doubt I would?" "No," he gestured her inside, "but I'm glad you trusted me enough." The penthouse was stark, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. It spoke of money but not comfort. This was a place to work, not to live. "This isn't where you live," Sienna observed. "No, I keep my real home separate." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "The life we lead requires walls within walls, secrets within secrets. You understand that." She took the offered glass. "I've lived it for 3 years." "And now," Dante settled onto the couch, "what do you want, Sienna, really?" "Justice." "Justice or revenge?" "Is there a difference?" He considered that. Sometimes, not always. Sienna sat across from him. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them. All those lights, all those lives. I want Dalka to know, she said quietly. Before he dies, I want him to understand that I survived, that I became stronger, that he didn't break me. She met Dante's eyes. I want him to be afraid the way my husband was afraid in those final moments. That's revenge. Then that's what I want. Dante nodded slowly. Then here's what we do. He laid out a plan. It was elegant, brutal. It would take months to execute properly. They would need to infiltrate Dalka's organization from multiple angles, turn his allies, expose his corruption to the old guard, isolate him completely before delivering the killing blow. But first, Dante said, you need to disappear again, completely. Dalka's heard whispers about a Volkov-Kovač alliance. He's paranoid now, looking for threats. So I stay undercover. No, he smiled. You become someone else entirely, someone who can get close to him without raising suspicion. I'm listening. Dalka's hosting a charity gala next month. He's trying to legitimize his operations, clean his reputation. He's invited business leaders, politicians, socialites. Dante leaned forward. And he's invited me, as a gesture of goodwill, building alliances between territories. You want me to go as your date? I want you to go as my fiancé. Sienna's breath caught. What? It's perfect cover. You'll be Natasha Volkov, my betrothed from the old country. Cultured, educated, completely different from Sienna Kovač. Different hair, accent, style. Close enough to observe Dalka, learn his routines, identify vulnerabilities. His eyes glittered. And when the time is right, you remove your mask and watch him realize the ghost has come home. It was insane. It was brilliant. We'd have to be convincing, Sienna said slowly. Very convincing. That means spending time together, in public, building a believable history. Yes. She studied him, this dangerous man who'd appeared in her life like fate's answer to a prayer for vengeance. Why are you really doing this, Dante? I told you, Dalka killed my brother. That's not all of it. It was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass. When I was 18, I watched my father kneel before men who had no right to judge him. I watched them execute him for a crime he didn't commit because he refused to betray his principles. His voice was soft, deadly. I spent the next decade building power, making connections, becoming strong enough that no one would ever make me kneel. But power isn't enough. Not when it's built on the corpses of good men destroyed by corruption. You're an idealist, Sienna said with surprise. I'm a pragmatist who remembers what it was like to be powerless. He looked at her. You want revenge, I want revolution. We can both get what we need. By pretending to be engaged. By becoming partners. Dante stood, offering his hand. What do you say, Sienna Kovač? Will you help me burn this rotten world down and build something better from the ashes? She should have said no, should have walked away, trusted no one, done this alone. But she'd been alone for 3 years, and she was so tired of it. Sienna took his hand. Let's burn it all. The transformation took 2 weeks. Sienna disappeared from the boutique, quit via email, apologetic and vague, moved out of her studio apartment in the middle of the night, became Natasha Volkov. Dante brought in specialists, a stylist who cut and dyed her hair, platinum blonde instead of dark brown, sleek and sophisticated, a voice coach who taught her a faint Russian accent, a wardrobe that screamed old money and new power. By the time they were finished, Sienna looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Good. She'd been too many people already. One more wouldn't matter. But the hardest part wasn't the physical transformation. It was learning to be with Dante in a way that looked real. They practiced at dinner parties thrown by his allies. Practiced the small touches, his hand on her lower back, her fingers on his arm. Practiced the private jokes and shared glances that spoke of intimacy. Practiced until it didn't feel like practicing anymore. You're good at this, Dante murmured one night. They were at a restaurant in Soho, dining with a shipping magnate Dante was courting for an alliance. Sienna had just made the man laugh, charmed his wife, secured a favorable deal with nothing but wit and wine. So are you, she replied. I mean it, you have a gift for this. For lying. for understanding people, reading them, giving them what they need to see. He leaned closer, playing the besotted fiancé for their audience. It's remarkable. It's survival. No, his eyes were serious despite the smile on his lips. It's power, you just haven't recognized it yet. Something warm unfurled in Sienna's chest. Dangerous, distracting. She pushed it away. This was fake, all of it. They were partners in revenge, nothing more. But when Dante's hand found hers under the table, she didn't pull away. The gala arrived like a countdown reaching 0. Sienna Natasha stood in front of the mirror in a gown that cost more than her old car. Black silk, elegant, deadly, diamond earrings that were actually listening devices, a clutch purse with a hidden blade. Ready, Dante appeared behind her, devastating in a tuxedo. As I'll ever be. They arrived at the plaza in a private car. Paparazzi flashed cameras. Dante played his role perfectly, helping her out with tender attention. Sienna smiled like a woman in love, not like a woman about to face her husband's murderer for the first time in 3 years. Inside, the ballroom glittered. Crystal chandeliers, string quartet, servers circulating with champagne and canapés. Everyone who mattered in New York's upper echelons, legitimate and otherwise. And at the center of it all, holding court like a king, was Victor Dalka. He looked older, grayer. Success had made him soft around the middle, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Still the eyes of a killer. Breathe, Dante whispered against her ear. You're Natasha, you've never met this man. Sienna breathed. They worked the room slowly. Dante introduced her to allies, rivals, neutral parties. She was charming, gracious, the perfect woman on the arm of a rising power. And all the while, she felt Dalka's attention like a weight. When he finally approached, she was ready. Dante Volkov, Dalka's voice was smooth, cultured. I'm so glad you accepted my invitation. How could I refuse? Dante shook his hand. Though I'm surprised you wanted me here, given our competitive positions. Competition keeps us sharp. Dalka's gaze slid to Sienna. And who is this vision? My fiancé, Natasha. Sienna extended her hand. Let him take it. Let him kiss her knuckles in an old-world gesture that made her skin crawl. Enchanted, Dalka murmured. Tell me, Natasha, how did you tame this particular wolf? Who says I tamed him? She smiled. Perhaps we simply found we hunt better together. Dalka laughed, delighted. I like her, Dante, she has teeth. She does indeed. They spoke for 10 more minutes. Polite conversation, veiled challenges, probing questions that Sienna deflected with ease. When Dalka finally excused himself, she felt the tension drain from her shoulders. You did well, Dante said quietly. He doesn't recognize me. Why would he? You're supposed to be dead. And even if some distant instinct whispers the truth, his ego won't let him believe it. Dante's hand pressed against her back. But we're not done yet. Now comes the hard part. The hard part was mingling, building connections, identifying which of Dalka's allies were truly loyal and which could be turned. Sienna moved through the ballroom like a ghost, listening, observing, remembering. She was so focused on her task that she almost missed it, the moment when everything changed. A server bumped into another guest. Champagne spilled. The guest, a nervous young man, stumbled backward, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. Time slowed. Sienna saw the trajectory, saw where the tray would fall, saw Dalka standing directly in the path of sharp, breaking crystal. Instinct moved her before thought could catch up. She lunged forward, grabbed Dalka's arm, pulled him back. The tray crashed where he'd been standing. Glass exploded across marble. The entire ballroom went silent. Dalka stared at her, really looked at her for the first time. And in his eyes she saw the flicker, recognition, impossible but there. You saved me, he said slowly. Pure reflex, she released him, stepped back. Are you hurt? No, thanks to you. He was still starring. Have we met before? Something about you seems. I have one of those faces. She forced a laugh. Dante jokes I look like every Slavic actress ever. The moment stretched, taut, dangerous. Then Dalka smiled. Perhaps, regardless, I owe you my thanks. Please let me make it up to you. Join me for dinner tomorrow night. Both of you, I insist. It was a trap, had to be. We'd be honored, Dante said smoothly. Later in the car, Sienna's hands shook. He knows. He suspects, that's different. It's suicide to have dinner with him. It's opportunity, Dante took her hand. Trust me. She looked at him. This man who'd become her partner, her ally, something more she didn't want to name. I do, she whispered. God help me, I do. Dinner was at Dalka's private club, a place where cameras didn't reach and witnesses were paid to forget. Sienna wore red, armor disguised as a dress. Dalka was waiting with wine and predatory courtesy. They danced around each other for 3 courses, talked business, politics, the changing landscape of power in New York, and all the while Dalka watched Sienna with eyes that held too much knowledge. Finally, over dessert, he leaned back. I'm going to be direct, Natasha. May I? Please. You remind me of someone I knew 3 years ago, someone who died in a fire. His smile was sharp. The resemblance is uncanny, but of course that's impossible. Sienna Kovač is dead. The name hung in the air like a blade. Sienna took a sip of wine. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? Dalka's eyes glittered. Because I'm not. She was weak, an outsider who had no business in our world. Her death was unfortunate, but ultimately necessary for progress. Rage turned Sienna's vision red, but she smiled. That's quite cold. It's realistic. In this life, sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. He turned to Dante. You understand that, don't you? It's why you've risen so quickly. No attachments, no weaknesses. I wouldn't say no attachments. Dante's hand found Sienna's. Some things are worth the risk. We'll see, Dalka stood. Thank you for joining me. I hope we can do this again soon. They left without incident, but Sienna knew. Everything was accelerating now. The endgame was beginning. Over the next month, it all came together. Dante's intelligence network identified every one of Dalka's operations. Sienna used her old contacts, people who remembered her husband, who'd been loyal once, to spread doubt. Whispers about Dalka's embezzlement, his betrayals, the innocent blood on his hands. They turned 3 of his key lieutenants, promised them power in the new order, made them understand that Dalka's reign was ending, one way or another. And through it all, Sienna and Dante grew closer. What had started as partnership became friendship. What had started as pretend intimacy became something neither wanted to acknowledge but couldn't deny. This is stupid, Sienna said one night. They were in his real apartment, not the Stark penthouse, but a brownstone in Brooklyn that felt like a home. Getting attached during something like this. Extremely stupid, Dante agreed. He was sitting beside her on the couch, close enough to feel his warmth. We should stop. We should. Neither of them moved. When this is over, Sienna said quietly, what happens to us? I don't know, he looked at her. What do you want to happen? I don't know either. Dante reached out, tucked a strand of platinum hair behind her ear. For what it's worth, I think Natasha suits you better than Vera, more honest somehow. Natasha doesn't exist. Neither does Vera. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we get to decide who we are. And who do you want to be? Someone worth the risk, he smiled. What about you? Sienna thought about that, about the woman she'd been, the sheltered wife who'd known nothing about her husband's world, the ghost she'd become, invisible, patient, planning revenge, the queen she was supposed to be, inheritor of blood and violence and power. I want to be free, she finally said. From the past, from expectations, from rage that burns everything it touches. Then let's finish this. Dante's hand cupped her face. And when we're done, we'll find out who we are when we're not pretending. He kissed her then, slow and deep and real. And for the first time in 3 years, Sienna felt something other than rage and grief. She felt hope. The trap closed on a Friday night. They lured Dalka to a warehouse in Red Hook with promises of a shipment. Drugs, weapons, profit. The kind of bait he couldn't resist. He came with 5 bodyguards, heavily armed, cautious but greedy. Dante's men were waiting, 10-to-1 odds, surrounded before Dalka even realized the danger. "Hello, Victor," Dante said, stepping from the shadows. Dalka spun, hand reaching for his weapon, too slow. His guards were already disarmed on their knees. "What is this?" Dalka's voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Justice or revenge, take your pick." "You think you can kill me? The entire organization will come down on you." "The organization already knows." Dante pulled out his phone, played a recording, Dalka's voice, confessing to embezzlement, to murder, to every crime he'd committed in the name of power. "We sent this to every lieutenant, every captain, every soldier in your operation. They know what you are now. The ones who weren't complicit are already flipping. The ones who were are running." Dalka's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "From me." Sienna stepped forward. She ditched the Natasha disguise. Dark hair again, her real face, her real voice. "Hello, Victor. Did you miss me?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No, you're dead. You died in the fire." "You wanted me dead. That doesn't mean you succeeded." She circled him slowly. 3 years, Victor. 3 years I've been watching, planning, learning everything about you, your businesses, your secrets, the families you destroyed, the people you killed." She stopped in front of him, "Including my husband." "He was weak." "He was kind. That's not the same thing." Sienna's voice was ice. "But you're right about one thing. Kindness is a luxury in this world, so I'm not going to give you any." She pulled out a phone, played a video. Dalka's offshore accounts empty now, money transferred to victims' families, his properties seized, his allies turned or arrested, his empire dissolved. "You've taken everything," Dalka whispered. "Not everything, not yet." Dante handed her a gun. She checked the chamber. Loaded. "Please," Dalka dropped to his knees. "Please, Sienna, I'll give you anything." "You have nothing left to give." She raised the weapon. "This is for Milosh, for your brother, Dante, for everyone you hurt in your pathetic grab for power." "Wait." She didn't. The shot echoed through the warehouse. Final, clean. Victor Dalka fell and didn't get up. Sienna lowered the gun. Her hand was steady. Her heart was quiet. It was done. The aftermath took weeks to settle. The old guard tried to contest her claim to the Kovač leadership, but public opinion was against them. Dalka's crimes had been exposed. The corruption laid bare. They needed someone clean, someone with a legitimate claim. Someone who'd survived hell and come back stronger. Sienna Kovač returned from the dead, not as a victim, as a queen. She restructured everything, cleaned house, established new rules, no trafficking, no exploitation. The Kovač operations would be brutal when necessary, but never cruel for cruelty's sake. Power with principles. Dante helped her through it. His organization merged with hers, not a takeover, but a genuine partnership. They became the strongest force in New York's underworld, respected and feared in equal measure. But on a quiet Tuesday night, 3 months after Victor Dalka's death, Sienna found herself back where it started, walking into a boutique on 5th Avenue, the same one where she'd worked as Vera. Michelle was still there. She squealed when she saw Sienna. "Oh my God, Vera, we thought you just disappeared. Where have you been?" Sienna smiled. "It's a long story. I'm actually not Vera anymore. I'm Sienna, and I bought this store last week. I wanted to come tell you personally, you're being promoted to manager." Michelle's eyes went wide. "What? Why?" "Because you were kind to me when I needed it. That matters." Sienna pressed an envelope into her hands. "New contract, better pay, full benefits, and if you ever have a customer like Gerald Hendricks, you have my permission to throw him out. No one treats my employees like that, not anymore." She left Michelle gaping and stepped back outside. Dante was waiting by the car. "Feel better?" he asked. "Weirdly, yes." They drove to the brownstone in Brooklyn. Their home now, not just his. Inside, it was warm, safe, real. "Do you ever regret it?" Dante asked later in the dark. They were tangled together in bed, content and tired. The revenge, the violence. Sienna thought about that, about Victor on his knees, about the weight of the gun, about the moment the trigger pulled and justice was served. "No," she said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret the world that made it necessary. But I don't regret surviving or fighting back. Or refusing to stay a victim." "Good." Dante pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because I don't regret finding you. Even though I'm terrifying. Especially because you're terrifying." She laughed, actually laughed. "What are we, Dante, really? Partners, allies, lovers, criminals with principles." He pulled her closer. "Does it need to be more defined than that?" "No," she settled against him. "I think I like the ambiguity. The Mafia Queen and her equally dangerous partner, living their best life. Sounds like a bad romance novel. Or the beginning of a legend." Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their own stories, some beautiful, some terrible, all of them fighting for survival in their own ways. And in a brownstone in Brooklyn, two ghosts who'd clawed their way back from death finally allowed themselves to rest. Finally allowed themselves to be human again. The revenge was complete, the empire rebuilt, the justice served. But the story was just beginning. Because Sienna Kovač learned something important through 3 years of hell and transformation. She learned that you could be broken and still become whole. You could lose everything and rebuild something better. You could be worthless in someone else's eyes and still be a queen in your own right. The man who'd screamed at her in that boutique would never know the truth. Would never know that the woman he'd called worthless was powerful beyond his comprehension. And that was fine. Because Sienna didn't need his validation, didn't need anyone's. She'd validated herself. If this story pulled you in from start to finish, hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. Your support keeps these worlds alive. See you in the next story.